What really happens to a woman's mind when sex quietly disappears from her life? You might think the answer is simple, nothing. But psychology paints a very different picture. Modern research shows that when intimacy fades away, the consequences don't just stop in the bedroom. They echo through emotions, stress levels, sleep patterns, even how a woman sees herself in the mirror. The effects are subtle, but over time, they can reshape how life feels. Let's start with mood. Large-scale surveys, including research published in the Journal of Affective Disorders, reveal a strong association between sexual inactivity and higher rates of depression in women. But here's the tricky part. Scientists say the link is bidirectional. In other words, depression itself can kill sexual desire, while the lack of sexual activity can intensify feelings of sadness and emptiness. It becomes a cycle. Low mood reduces sexual activity, which then further deepens the low mood. Psychologists sometimes call this a feedback loop, where one problem keeps feeding the other. The brain's chemistry explains why. During sex and orgasm, the nervous system releases a powerful mix of dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, and oxytocin. Dopamine is the reward chemical that gives a burst of motivation and pleasure. Endorphins relieve pain and elevate mood. Oxytocin, famously known as the cuddle hormone, creates feelings of closeness and safety. Together, these chemicals act like natural antidepressants and anxiolytics. When sex is missing, women don't get those chemical resets, and stress tends to hit harder. Neuropsychologists even compare it to skipping exercise. Your body loses a key way to regulate stress and mood. And then there's cortisol, the infamous stress hormone. Sex, especially orgasm, normally lowers cortisol levels, acting like a natural off switch for anxiety. But in women who go long stretches without sexual activity, research shows baseline cortisol levels can remain elevated, making it harder to recover from everyday stresses. Chronic high cortisol is linked to anxiety, irritability, emotional fatigue, and even difficulty concentrating. In other words, sexual inactivity can quietly turn up the volume on stress until everything feels heavier. But hormones aren't the only part of the story. Sexual activity also plays a big role in self-image and confidence. Psychologists studying sexual self-concept, essentially how people view themselves as sexual beings, have found that sexually active women who feel satisfied with their experiences often report higher levels of self-esteem and body confidence. On the flip side, when intimacy vanishes unexpectedly or involuntarily, some women feel less desirable, less wanted, and even disconnected from their bodies. Over time, this can erode confidence and fuel insecurity, not just in the bedroom, but in everyday life. But here's an important distinction. If abstinence is voluntary, those negative effects often don't show up. When women choose celibacy for personal, cultural, or spiritual reasons, they frequently report neutral or even positive outcomes, like increased focus, clarity, or empowerment. So the key factor isn't whether sex is present, it's whether the absence feels like a choice or a punishment. And this is where solo sex enters the picture. For years, psychologists have studied masturbation and discovered that it plays a surprisingly important role in women's mental health. Far from being just a private indulgence, masturbation is often used as a tool for emotional regulation. A study in the Journal of Sex Research found that women who masturbate regularly often do it not just for arousal, but to reduce stress, manage anxiety, or lift their mood after a difficult day. Neuroscientifically, the body doesn't differentiate much between solo and partnered orgasms. Both release oxytocin, endorphins, and dopamine. That means many of the psychological benefits of sex can be accessed even without a partner. In fact, Psychologists argue that solo sexual activity may act as a buffer, protecting women against some of the negative mental health effects of sexual inactivity. But what happens inside relationships when sex disappears? This is where the psychological impact can become even sharper. Relationship researchers have found that when intimacy vanishes from a partnership, women often interpret it as rejection. Even if the reason is something external, like stress, illness, or fatigue, the emotional takeaway often feels personal. I'm not wanted anymore. That sense of rejection can snowball into insecurity, suspicion, and even resentment. A study in the archives of sexual behavior found that couples with lower sexual frequency also reported lower relationship satisfaction and higher levels of conflict, even if they weren't directly arguing about sex. The silence itself becomes the problem, eroding emotional closeness. For many women, it's not just the absence of sex, but the absence of communication that causes the deepest wounds. Then there's sleep. After orgasm, prolactin and oxytocin flood the brain, creating a sense of deep relaxation. That's why so many people drift off after sex. When women don't have that biological reset, sleep often becomes more restless, with more tossing and turning. And poor sleep is no small matter. Psychologists know that insomnia and sleep fragmentation are major risk factors for depression, anxiety, and irritability. It's another feedback loop. Lack of sex disrupts sleep, poor sleep worsens mood, and low mood decreases desire, continuing the cycle. Now let's zoom out to physical health. Some studies suggest that regular sexual activity may boost immune function. For example, researchers at Wilkes University found that people who reported frequent sex had higher levels of immunoglobulin A, IgA, an antibody that helps fight infections. While the link isn't fully proven in women specifically, the possibility is intriguing, that sexual activity might strengthen the body's defenses, and by extension, improve mental well-being through better overall health. But here's where psychology gives us an important nuance. Not all women experience negative effects from sexual inactivity. In fact, many women who choose abstinence report benefits. Some describe increased focus, greater control over their lives, or deeper connection to spiritual practices. For these women, abstinence is empowering rather than limiting. Psychologists emphasize this distinction. It's involuntary abstinence, when women want sex but don't have it, or when intimacy is withheld by a partner, that tends to cause distress. So what can women do when lack of sex starts to weigh on their mental health? Science points to several strategies. The first is communication. If the issue lies within a relationship, honest conversation without blame can prevent misunderstandings and reduce the sting of rejection. The second is alternative intimacy. Non-sexual touch like cuddling, massage, or even long hugs can still release oxytocin and reduce loneliness. The third is solo sex, which remains one of the most reliable ways to release stress and maintain healthy sexual functioning. The fourth is therapy. Individual therapy can address issues like body image or past trauma, while couples therapy can rebuild connection and intimacy. Finally, medical evaluation matters. Hormonal imbalances, birth control side effects, and antidepressant medications are all known to impact libido. Sometimes the solution lies in biology rather than psychology. The bottom line is clear. Sexual activity is more than physical pleasure. It's a hidden part of psychological health, influencing mood, stress regulation, sleep quality, self-esteem, and relationship satisfaction. When it's missing, especially against a woman's will, the effects can be real and far-reaching, But science also shows that women are far from powerless. With self-awareness, intentional choices, coping strategies, and open communication, it's entirely possible to protect mental health, whether sex is frequent, occasional, or entirely absent. So, the next time someone says sex is just physical, remember this: the mind begs to differ. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video insightful or helpful, please take a moment to comment "insight" below. Your feedback means a lot. Don't forget to share this message with your family and friends, because knowledge grows when shared. If you want to explore more topics like this, be sure to check out the recommended videos on your screen. Remember, understanding ourselves better leads to healthier choices and happier lives. Stay curious, stay positive, and take care of your mind and body. Until next time, stay safe and keep learning.